How long should I stay at my current job? This is the part 2 of a 2-part series. Part 1 was focusing on the questions to ask as it relates to this topic, the main topic. Part 2 is going to be focusing on the circumstances or situations where the questions that I had outlined in part 1 wouldn't really apply or be as relevant, the exceptions, right? So if you have not seen part 1, I would strongly encourage that you check out part 1 before watching this video. But at the same time, if you don't want to spend 20 minutes listening to me talk about all these different questions, I have summarized the content, the questions from part 1, and I have copied it below. So I would also just, at least read those questions, because otherwise none of this is really going to make sense, okay? Also, before I get into part 2, the exceptions, I do want to mention that these videos are really meant to help you. It's not meant to stress you out. A lot of the questions that I had outlined in part 1, you might not be able to answer, and that's okay, right? I think it's foolish to try to spend so much time and so much energy trying to answer every single one of these questions, because life is not about how many questions you're able to answer. I think it's really about what you can make out of the questions that you are able to answer. So focus on the questions that you are able to answer, and with that said, I'll get into part 2. So the exceptions, the first exception would be if you have a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity. That is pretty self-explanatory, right? No questions asked. If one of these opportunities come, you just go and take it. Exception number 2 would be the opposite, where if your work environment is so toxic, right? I don't think it is worth going through so much pain and stress if you feel like going into your workplace feels like you're getting harassed or you're getting abused or you're getting bullied, right? None of this is worth it. So if you feel like that, I would simply just, call it a day and then get out of there ASAP. Exception number 3 would be, let's say that, you don't have once-in-a-lifetime opportunity, and also your workplace is not toxic, but you're at your current firm because of the name value. In that case, I would say, you knew what you were getting yourself into. So even if a lot of the answers to the questions that I had outlined in part 1 all directs to you leaving the firm, if you're there because of the name value, I would stay for, let's say, at least a year or 2, or more perhaps, depending on where you are in your career. Of course, if you're right out of school, you don't need to stay there for a year, because I think the younger you are, the earlier in your career you are, it's okay to make a quick transition from one firm to another if you feel like that particular environment was not the right fit for you. Exception number 4 is if you need to make a living, you have a family to support, you have bills to pay. These are like real issues. So even if a lot of the answers to part 1 questions all direct to you leaving the firm, I would just be strategic and be extra careful in ensuring that you have an offer or 2 aligned before you send your notification. Exception number 5. If you're in a small office, or if you're at an office that's just getting started, kind of like a startup, then a lot of the questions that I had outlined in part 1 wouldn't really apply, because as you can read in the description that I had summarized, some of the questions were referencing the culture, value, hierarchy, structure, operation of that particular firm. And if you're in a small office, some of these don't even exist because it's so small, right? Or if you're at an office that's just getting started, things are not set in stone, which means that you might actually have the capacity to influence what the hierarchy or what the structure of the office becomes, right? So in that aspect, it might be worth staying because you might actually have the opportunity to grow very quickly as a key member in shaping the blank of the firm, the blank being value, culture, structure, operation, etc., right? So there's a lot of room for growth in those circumstances. So it might be worth staying even if your response to the questions from part 1 all directs to you leaving the firm. All right? That sums up part 2. And the list of exceptions could obviously go on and on and on. Similar to how the list of questions for part 1 could also go on and on and on. Everybody's different, and similarly, every firm is also very different. I think it's important to find a mutually beneficial relationship between the employer and the employee, right? So that's you and the company. And it's not too different from human relationship. The difference, I would say, is that when it comes to employee and employer, that relationship, I would think that it's a little bit more quantifiable. So these questions and these exceptions that I had outlined are obviously meant to help you quantify and assess your current relationship with your firm. And hopefully it could also be a way to establish a criteria for your future relationship. All right? So hopefully that was helpful, and thank you, and I'll see you next time.